righty. So let us start it up.
Can you hear me?
Welcome, everyone, to Friends of Five, brought to you by 5 Reasons Sports Network. Today, I think we killed it, Ryan. We absolutely got probably the best guest we've gotten so far. Probably arguably the GOAT of Miami Sports Radio. But before we get to the GOAT, let's talk about some ways that you can help 5 Reasons Sports out. You can help us out by going on to our website, 5reasonsports.com. You can head over to the merchandise store. We got a lot of nice shirts, guys. Make sure you pick one up. Right now, our guest is looking at it thinking, man, I need to get some of these shirts so I can wear them after work every single day. All right. Another way you can support us is by going onto our YouTube. Make sure you subscribe, like, and comment. Follow us on Twitter. My name is Matthew Perdomo. On my left side, you got your other host, Ryan Lazar. Both our Twitter is here on the page. And as always, make sure you follow us on our Twitter. And on with our guest. His name is Jorge Sedano. You've probably seen him on ESPN about 1 million times. But what you probably didn't know is that he actually started his career here in Miami. He is actually born in New York, bred in Miami. Welcome, Mr. Jorge Sedano. How you doing?
Hey, guys. How are you? If I'm your best guest, this must be a really low bar. So I do appreciate the kind words, though.
Oh, man. Be back.
Okay.
So how you doing? How you doing, George? How's everything?
I'm good. Look, man, just trying to manage like everybody else, right? We're all kind of dealing with the same situation and just doing the best we can to be responsible and help as many people as possible, right? Along with kind of taking care of ourselves at the same time.
All right. Well, with that, hopefully
Can you hear me?
out there safe.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
The on button.
So go ahead, Ryan. What do you got for Jorge Sedano?
All right, Mr. Jorge Sedano, thank you. Ultimately, you're a pioneer in Miami sports radio, and right now you said you're in California.
I am. I live in LA, and we are here hunkered down in Los Angeles.
Okay, so will you be attending any of these upcoming games in Orlando?
I don't know yet. We haven't made those decisions yet on the amount of talent. My guess is, look, because of the limited amount of people that are going to be in that bubble, as we know, teams are even being limited to, I think it's 35, 37 people, I guess, in their entourage. And that includes, their traveling party includes players, coaches, trainers, et cetera, security people, so PR people. So, like they're being limited, we're going to be limited too. I don't know if our entire group who covers the NBA normally and does games normally will be allowed to go. I mean, all that stuff is still very much up in the air, and my guess is we'll probably know here in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Is there a chance that, because the coronavirus cases are rising in Florida, is there any chance possible that it might have to be changed from Orlando, or are we past that? We have to make it work. We have to be all in on this.
Yeah, I would say it's Orlando or bust at this point, and I think that that's pretty much the deal. I think that, again, the players understand the situation. And look, there's going to be players, we've seen it, who have dropped out for one reason or another, right? We had Avery Bradley with the Lakers, whose son is 6 years old and is immunocompromised. And he probably wouldn't be able to travel into the bubble based on his previous medical history. We know about Trevor Ariza. He had a situation with his son as well, and he's not going to partake. You got guys like Davis Bertans of the Wizards who are like, yo, man, I don't make a lot of money, and I'm in line for a potential 8-figure-a-year payday, and I'm not going to run the risk of this kind of weird restart with guys potentially susceptible to injuries. So I think that every guy is going to have their own potential reasons, but I do think the overwhelming majority of guys are going to be there, and I would absolutely be floored if one of the superstars wasn't there. I feel like the superstars have all bought in. And by the way, they should. Adam Silver is clearly the most player-friendly commissioner in all of sports, maybe in all of sports history, to be frank with you. And he's built up a lot of equity. Remember, very quickly into his tenure, he did something that was unprecedented in ousting Donald Sterling, and rightfully so. And, over time, he has shown that he's not just an ally to players, that he is a partner with players. And I think that his relationship with the stars of the league and just the players in general, and Chris Paul, who is the Players Association president, and Michelle Roberts, who oversees the Players Association, he's kept the harmony and kept the peace, and he's built up enough equity where I think guys buy into him.
Yeah, I feel like Adam Silver is not just running it like a business; he's running it like an actual fan of the NBA, right? Like he actually cares about it and like the actual product and the actual players more than anything, because he realizes that without the players, the NBA won't exist.
Yeah, look, I think there's some of that. He is a fan of the league. I think, look, and I'm not saying I don't know the inner workings of all the other leagues, right? Like I know some people who work at other leagues, but I know the NBA. I'm intimately familiar with the people that work there, and there's not a person that works in the league office, to my knowledge, that isn't a super fan of the NBA. But to your point, I think that Adam is just smart. He's as smart a commissioner as there's ever been. And look, David, his predecessor, David Stern, was unbelievably intelligent too.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to knock David. It's just different approaches, right? I think Adam is a bit more measured. I think Adam, and I mean that in a positive way, obviously. Adam is a bit more measured. Adam is someone who's just really puts thought into every decision. And I think that maybe unlike other commissioners in other sports, he's very much someone who wants to collaborate with the owners that he works for and, of course, the players in the league as well.
Nice. George, so right now the Lakers are supposedly the favorites. You've seen LeBron in a Lakers uniform, in a Heat uniform up close. Would you say there's any similarities in LeBron like now with the Lakers that you saw perhaps when he was with the Heat? Is there anything that he may have taken with him from Miami?
So, yeah. Look, I've clearly been around LeBron a lot. The 4 years in Miami, and I've been around him while I've been covering the NBA for ESPN. And a lot of those do include Laker games. And what I would say is this, is LeBron over time, not even just now with the Lakers, but I would say even when he first made the transition in 2014 from Miami to Cleveland, what I would say is LeBron really took a lot of the stuff he learned, right? For lack of a better phrase, let's call it the secret sauce of Pat Riley and the Heat. Yeah. And he kind of took that and wanted to implement it, right? And in Cleveland, when he arrived there, it was a young team for the most part, a bunch of guys who hadn't won. And it's why he made sure to bring over Mike Miller and James Jones and guys like that. And later on, Birdman was part of one of those teams, right? And just kind of make sure to set a culture, basically, because they didn't have a culture in Cleveland. If you remember, there was a game in 2014 where LeBron was disgusted at Kyrie because he had one assist against the Blazers. And there was like this big team meeting or whatnot. And that was kind of part of it. If you remember, Deion Waiters wasn't part of that Cleveland team that LeBron returned to for very long, right? Which is funny because now he's part of this Lakers team. But I think that LeBron learned a lot from Miami. He would say it. It's kind of like his college experience, right? Where he was able to learn how to win. He was the best player on the planet, so that certainly helped. But I do think he understood kind of how to run an organization, basically, as a leader of an organization. And he's the leader of any organization he's going to be on. It's why Dwayne Wade turned kind of the reins over to him in the second year with the Heat. So LeBron has taken that and run with it, basically, since then. And you saw it in Cleveland where he had to reestablish a culture. And you saw it here with the Lakers. When he first arrived, that team wasn't a LeBron James type team. All the young guys and didn't have established veterans. This roster with the Lakers, with veteran guys like Avery Bradley, who we mentioned won't be there, but Danny Green, right? Dwight Howard, JaVale McGee, right? Those type of guys who've been through deep playoff runs. Those are the teams that LeBron thrives with, right? And I think that's what you're seeing here. And obviously having a real sidekick in Anthony Davis, who, look, is one of the top 6 or 7 players in the NBA, that helps in any way. That helps LeBron in any way of him trying to achieve his goal, which is ultimately trying to win championships.
Yeah. How big of a blow is losing Avery Bradley?
Look, I don't want to diminish Avery Bradley. Avery Bradley was really good for the Lakers this year. He was arguably their best perimeter defender. Wow. But there are a number of guys on that roster that could fill the role, maybe not exactly the way he would, but they're pretty heavy when it comes to wing players. They're less heavy when it comes to front court players. And I think that without Avery, I think their record was 12-1, if I recall correctly, in games that he missed for whatever reason due to injury or whatnot. And look, they've got a guy in Danny Green, who I mentioned, who they think can fill that role. He's a starter. He can play multiple positions on the floor. That may give Kyle Kuzma more of an opportunity. They love Kentavious Caldwell-Pope as a defender, even though he can be a little streaky offensively. And Alex Caruso, as crazy as this sounds to people who don't watch the Lakers regularly, he's been fantastic for them. He's been an unbelievable defender, and he's been an average to above average player offensively. They are a plus team when Alex Caruso's on the floor, and it starts with his defense, I think, more so than anything else. So when you have that, they could throw Dion in there if they have to. I look at Dion or even a J.R. Smith, who's been rumored to go there, as kind of like break the glass in case of emergency, because you're going to need to spread minutes out. And particularly in this regular season startup when they're going to play the 8 games. So I think that they'll be fine. If Dwight Howard were to not play, and that's still up in the air at the moment, I think that could be something that could be a little more challenging for the Lakers, because JaVale McGee is also someone who has been immunocompromised in the past. He has asthma. He also missed last season, a big chunk of last season, with pneumonia. So it would make their front court much thinner with a guy like Anthony Davis, who is, all world, as we just talked about, but is a guy who doesn't, in theory, love to play the center position all that much. He prefers to play off the ball and, be the power forward.
With that said, do the Lakers have what it takes to win this year? Do you think that they're a better team than the Clippers?
I think if both teams – and by the way, I meant out of the paint, not off the ball with Anthony Davis. But, man, that's really tough. I would say it's a coin flip. Right. Here's the way I would look at it. I think LeBron and Anthony Davis are, all-world top 7 players. Let's just do it this way. If you look at the Lakers' best 2 players and you look at the Clippers' best 2 players, you're talking about 4 guys in the top 10 in my estimation, okay? But then beyond that,
right,
I would give the Clippers a little bit of an advantage from a depth standpoint, right? Where you've got Lou Will, Montrezl Harrell, right, who can score the ball, both guys. You've got Patrick Beverley, who, he's not much of a scorer per se, but he can handle his own, particularly shooting from the corners. And we know what kind of defender he certainly is and what an emotional leader he is for that particular squad. They've got a lot of shooting on that team as well. All those guys I mentioned outside of Harrell basically are guys that historically have shot above 37% for their career from 3. And they've got Landry Shamet, who has been up and down. He's a young player, but he's certainly a really good shooter. So they've got maybe more depth than the Lakers. But here's the thing. This is where I think the Lakers have an advantage, and it's Anthony Davis. There's really not a guy, at least on the roster currently, and I know that the Clippers just added Joakim Noah not that long ago,
right.
But I don't know if Noah is, at this stage of his career, someone that I could pit against Anthony Davis for long stretches of time. But the Clippers just don't have an answer for Anthony Davis. And to me, the Lakers will go as far in that series as Anthony Davis takes them, because we know what LeBron's going to bring to the table. We know what Kawhi's going to bring to the table. And I have a pretty decent idea of what Paul George can bring to the table, even though he hasn't had a tremendous amount of success in the postseason. But we've only seen Anthony Davis win 1 playoff series in his career. And I think that a lot of the eyes and the microscope will be on him once they get to that particular series.
So let's switch it up. Let's talk about the Miami Heat, because that's what I'm really interested in. How surprised were you with this team this year?
I wasn't all that surprised, to be honest.
Yeah.
I felt that they'd be a top 3 or 4 seed the whole time. I talked about that a lot on television and on radio and on social media. And, look, the way I looked at it was this way. Basically, if you give Eric Spoelstra a top 15 player in the NBA, and Jimmy Butler is that, in my estimation, he's going to win at least 45 or 46 games. Like, historically, that's kind of where he's been. And even the year, I think it was, 2016 was the year that the Heat lost in 7 to the Toronto Raptors. And Dwayne was still the best player on that team. I know they had Goran on that team, Hassan, and a couple of guys. But Dwayne, in my opinion, even then was still a top 15. Okay, maybe I think that, but I know people maybe argue top 20, 25, whatever. The point is he was one of the better players in the league still. and he showed it. I thought that season, particularly during the playoffs, that you give Eric that kind of guy, and that year they won 48 games. So like I just felt like going into it that Jimmy being kind of ready to prove to people that he can lead a team, and Eric being as good as he is, I think he's top 3 coach in the NBA. I thought that they had a really good chance to make a lot of noise this season, and they have.
We can't hear you again, right?
Right that again, buddy. You're having a rough go. I mean, listen, it's okay. Calm down. Take a breath. Take a 20-second timeout. Go ahead. What do you got for me?
All right. So this is what I want to ask. So you just said Eric Spoelstra is a top 3 coach, right?
Yeah.
I somewhat believe he's in that realm. Maybe not top 3, but he has to be at least top 5, without a doubt, right? So I think that I've seen you. I saw last year where you had like a little debate on TV with somebody about
during a game. Yeah.
During a game. I remember that, right? Yeah. But behind the scenes, right? How often do you have to defend Eric Spoelstra being, at least a top 5 coach, or like, because I don't feel like a lot of people actually believe it either.
I would say that people that cover the league on a daily basis feel like I feel, right? Top 3, top 5. I think that the majority of people that think otherwise are people who aren't people who cover the NBA regularly. And look, Dan Dockich is a friend of mine, right? But a work colleague, a friend. I've worked with him before. I enjoy working those summer league games with him. But he is, he's a guy with a lot of opinions. But so am I. And he's a guy who covers college basketball mostly. So he spends a lot of his time focusing on the college ranks. I'm not saying he doesn't watch the NBA, but he doesn't watch the NBA with as close an eye as myself and people who cover the league day in and day out. So it's not a knock on him. But I would say that generally speaking, the people who are not as high on Eric are just people who just aren't as familiar with the league as people who cover it regularly.
All right, cool.
Because look, I'll tell you this. I know that Zach Lowe has talked about this before on his podcast. I know Woj just talked about it on his podcast. There have been teams that would be willing to give up a first-round pick for Eric Spoelstra. Like, that's how impressive they think he is as a coach league-wide. And by the way, don't go that far. The GM survey that comes out every year on NBA.com had him and Pop as the top 2 guys. So, as far as the GM survey is concerned. So it's not really a stretch to say that he's a top 3 or even a top 5 head coach in the NBA.
All right. Can you hear me now?
I got you. Yeah.
All right. So right now, who would you say is your favorite player in the Miami Heat?
Ooh, that's a good question. I like Jimmy. I like Jimmy because not only what he's been able to bring to the table from an accountability standpoint, I feel like Jimmy, and I had this conversation with Spo and a couple of the Heat people over the last few months when the season was going on. And I did one of their games in New Orleans, and Eric and I were talking, and he said something to the effect of, I want to try to get the quote right, but I'll paraphrase. But it was something like, I said, because people, some people think he's kind of crazy. And he kind of chuckled and said, yeah, but he's our kind of crazy. And I always felt that. When he went to Miami, I thought it was going to be a marriage made in heaven, because he kind of reminds me of like a mixture of like Dwayne and Zoe, like personality-wise. So I felt like culture-wise, it would be a perfect fit. And I just think because of the teams he was on previously, and again, I'm not knocking individual players or even individual franchises. I just think that everyone knows that Miami's not for everybody, that the Heat is not for everybody. And the guys that Miami brings in are guys that can play in any organization. And, if they leave Miami, they're like, oh, this is a breeze compared to what we were doing in Miami. And look, even a guy like Jay Crowder recently said that, yeah, this is wild. Like the type of stuff they make them go through, the drilling, the exercise off the court, the testing of the body fat, all those things we've heard the legends about over years. And he like jokingly said, man, D Wade did all this every day, and it's like, yeah, because not every superstar does that stuff. So I think because of that, I thought it was going to be a great fit. And by the way, he's just been an unbelievable personality. Not that he wasn't previously, but I think now because he's so much more happy in this particular structure that anytime he's in front of a camera, whether it was the JJ Redick podcast that I saw him do or the Megan Rapinoe Sue Bird podcast, like he's just been super loose and fun and just cursing up a storm, which I think is great, and kind of being loose and letting go. And I think that's kind of opened me up to him. But look, there's a lot of guys on this roster to like. I mean, who doesn't like what Bam can bring to the table? I think Bam is the most improved player in the NBA.
Yes.
Their own kind of version of this voting at ESPN, the 70 different people that work at ESPN that cover the NBA. And I voted for Bam. Now, I do think Brandon Ingram will get votes, and I'm curious to see how that will work out. But I think it's basically a two-person race when it comes to that particular award because Pascal Siakam, as great as he is, I don't know if he's going to win it for another year in a row. And Luka, look, Luka's in the MVP discussion. Like I guess you could technically make a case for him in the MIP discussion, but Luka's going to be a top 5 MVP vote getter in my estimation. So, but yeah, Bam has been incredible. Bam is one of the better defenders in the league. His offense is certainly coming around. He's doing a better job at finishing around the rim, which was a big problem for him early in his career. And I think little by little, you're seeing him kind of expand his range. He's comfortable shooting that shot from around the free throw line, 15 to 17 feet, that kind of free throw extended area. And the more and more he progresses there, I think the more and more dangerous he is. But look at what he does on defense, as I mentioned earlier. He locks on some of the best players, and they don't fare very well against him. I haven't looked at the numbers recently, but I think the last time I looked it up, when he was on Giannis directly, I think Giannis shot like 35% on like 20-something shots. So I do love what Bam brings to the table. I just like their team. Like I think that they have a really well-rounded team. I'm kind of almost thankful that they get this restart. Clearly, nobody's thankful for the pandemic. Right. But I think it's good because they can kind of get a training camp together with Andre Iguodala and Jay Crowder and not learning on the fly like they were trying to do. Because I think that Andre and Jay can be big factors in what they want to do. And it also rested Goran a little bit. We know he's getting older. His knees are kind of, creeping up on him a little bit. And it gets Hero back in the rotation. It gets Myers Leonard back in the rotation. I just think that the possibilities for this team are greater than what most people would think. I think that they're a team that can surprise people potentially in the playoffs.
All right. So if the Lakers and the Miami Heat end up in the finals, who are you rooting for? That's what I want to know.
Well, it depends. If I'm actually calling the game, then I don't have a chance of rooting for anybody. Okay. I got to stay impartial in that situation. But look, this isn't a secret that I've grown up a Miami Heat fan. If they played and I wasn't there, all my friends in LA know who I'm rooting for.
So we can find you here at a bar in Miami. Are you going to be partying over here?
I don't know if I'm flying anywhere, to be honest, outside of Orlando to a bubble. To be honest with you, if they ask me to do that, I haven't gone out very much here in LA, and it's been over the last few months. I know everything is surging now, but over the last few months, it's been a lot safer here than in most places. And I haven't left the house too many times other than do groceries and maybe go for a run and things like that.
All right. Question. So Miami, as you know, they've been very flirtatious with free agents or potential superstars. And I'm sure you've heard all of the back and forth, Bradley Beal, Giannis. And so do you think anybody in Miami besides maybe Bam and Jimmy is untouchable? And do you think perhaps that they're kind of grooming certain players to be traded for Bradley Beal?
I look at Bradley Beal as like a plan B or C. Like, I don't think that that's like plan A. I think that if you look at the way the Heat have structured their contracts, it seems fairly obvious that they want to make a run at Giannis. I think after that, I think Victor Oladipo, and I know this stuff has been reported recently, but this is stuff we've talked about for a long time. I think that Victor Oladipo could end up being a guy that they target. Now, look, a lot with Vic has to tend to do with his injury, right? And where he is physically. He only played 13 games since his return from that devastating knee injury. And, he didn't look great. Like, he had moments where he looked pretty good. But for the overall, I don't think he felt very comfortable. I did one of their games. And yeah, he just didn't look right yet. And I think that he's one of those guys that potentially, I know Woj has reported this, will potentially sit out. And again, it's because of that, right? Like, why risk coming back in this situation when he has, I don't know, 15 months from now, he could be potentially a max contract player. Right. Like, why not get your body right? So, but I do think that those are guys they're targeting. And then, Bradley Beal may end up being the case if they don't land one of those guys in free agency. But I don't know. I don't feel that confident that Bradley Beal is on the front burner per se. Like, I don't think that he's top of mind, right? Like, I think that they look at him as someone that they can potentially deal for if needed. But look, the Washington Wizards are not interested at the moment in trading Bradley Beal. So, to my knowledge, they're going to want a lot for Bradley Beal, at least currently.
I agree.
I mean, we'll see what happens. So, what's the overall ceiling for the Miami Heat this year? What are we thinking for that?
What's that? I didn't catch that.
I said, what is the overall ceiling for the Miami Heat?
This playoffs.
Look, I think if things break right for them, I mean, they could be in the conference finals. I don't think that's likely, but I do think it's possible. And I think because of the stuff I mentioned, right? I think they match up pretty well against Milwaukee. I'll take my chances with Eric over Bud. Giannis, Bam has done a pretty good job on Giannis, as we illustrated earlier. And I think that the Heat believe that as great as Giannis is, that he still has a few holes in his game offensively, right? And we've seen teams exploit that, including the Heat, right, during the regular season this year. And I think that they believe that if you can get them to the last 5 minutes of the game against the Bucks, that they like their chances. Now, look, there's going to be nights that the Bucks are unstoppable. Giannis is a freak. It's why his nickname is the Greek Freak. And they've got unbelievable shooting surrounding him. So there are going to be nights where they're going to shoot crazy numbers from three. And there's nobody in the league that can stop that. But I do think that over a 7-game series, you have to make certain adjustments. And in the past, Mike Budenholzer has been, I don't want to say reluctant, but he believes in his philosophy and that it will overcome in the long run. Yeah. I guess we'll have to kind of wait and see. But I do think that the Heat have the depth, that the Heat have the guy or guys that they can throw at Giannis, because it's not just Bam. It's Iguodala. It's Crowder, right? It's Jimmy. And I think that they are fairly well constructed to potentially knock off Milwaukee. But again, I just don't know how likely that is. Just because Milwaukee, man, they were rolling during the regular season.
Except every time they face the Heat. That's the only time.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Sometimes you have a bad matchup. But look, I'll tell you this. As someone who covered those LeBron, Wade, Bosch teams, the regular season is not always an indicator of how the playoffs will go. Because if that were the case, the Chicago Bulls would have beaten the Heat in the playoffs, and the Boston Celtics would have beaten the Heat in the playoffs, and the Brooklyn Nets would have beaten the Heat in the playoffs. So that you can't always just rely on the regular season.
All right.
George, being a Cuban American such as myself, you're, and like I mentioned early on, you're a pioneer for sports radio and in general. Would you like to perhaps shed any light on where your career has gone, and I guess any appreciation you have for the city of Miami, or any tips perhaps to get to where you are right now with ESPN and having your own show?
I mean, listen, first of all, pioneer makes me feel really old. Okay?
You are, man. I know you got 10 years on me, but you're still pioneer. I swear.
It makes me feel really old. But look, man, here's what I would say. Miami, no matter where I live, is always going to be my home. Like, there's no question. I still actually own a home in Miami. So I don't. What's that?
Is it next to Faith?
No, it's not. It's not next to Pace. Not next to Pace. I grew up around there though. I grew up in that neighborhood. So, but yeah, I don't know home there anymore. But I did. My parents did. I grew up in that neighborhood right there, Opa-locka Hialeah border. I was there all the time. That's why I ended up going to school there. But yeah, still own a home in Miami. I have all sorts of love for Miami. I still have plenty of family and friends and lifelong friends in Miami, including the guy you guys work for, and Ethan. Yeah, look, what I would say is this, man. Like, you guys now, like what you're doing, I didn't have this advantage. You know what I'm saying? Where I could like pop up on the internet and create my own thing and kind of hone the craft, right? Like, it was different back then. I had to bust my behind to, even get a slither of airtime. And eventually over time that ended up working out, right? But I just think ultimately I'm a big believer in that hard work and luck need to kind of marry, right? And, not everyone's lucky. I worked with a lot of guys and ladies over the years who were more talented than me. And, for whatever reason, they just they couldn't deal with the ups and downs of the business, sometimes the financial side of the business, especially early in your career. I think that a lot of people get, discouraged by that stuff. So I kind of stuck through it. I got lucky and things kind of clicked for me fairly quickly. And, I kind of got on a national stage within the first 4 or 5 years of my career, and then was able to come back to Miami and now back on a national stage at ESPN. And look, I've just been really lucky and very blessed, right? Like, I know it sounds ridiculously cliched, but it really is the truth. And I've had a lot of good friends and a lot of good mentors. And just, I've tried to pay that forward constantly because I believe in karma and stuff like that. So, I'm not saying I'm perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I certainly do my best, I think, for the most part, to just try to be a nice person, right? Like, I think that's the least we can ask of people. And I know maybe I wasn't always a nice person to somebody, or, because I'm sure I may have had a bad day, but I think that I am very conscious always, and have been since I was a kid, of trying to be the nicest person I could be, because I believe in this theory too. The people you see on the way up in this business are the same people you're going to see on the way down. And there's always a rise and a fall, right? And some people's rise is meteoric and the fall is gradual, and sometimes the rise is gradual and the fall is meteoric. So that's why I always say just be kind to people, because you're going to see that person again at some point, because this business is very small.
Yeah.
Awesome, man. Hold on, Matt. Let me ask you one more thing, George.
Whatever you want. It doesn't have to be one more. You can ask me 10 more.
Oh, man. All right, cool.
No, well, all right. So who would you say is – I've seen you've had a few interviews face-to-face. Who would you say is a tougher interview between Coach Pop, Russell Westbrook, and Kawhi Leonard?
Ooh, that's a good one. So I've got a funny Pop story that I can tell you about my interactions with him. But Russell Westbrook has been great anytime I've interviewed him. So I think the issues Russell has been more in the media scrum, right? When there's a lot of reporters kind of surrounding him. But any instance I've ever been associated with Russell, any chance I've had to talk to him, he's been great. So I have zero complaints about Russell. And I think most of my colleagues who do sidelines have said the same. But Kawhi's great, man. He's a nice guy. He just doesn't say very much. You know what I'm saying? And I think that the key to all these interviews when you're doing sidelines and you're doing these post-game interviews or in-game interviews is always ask a who, what, when, why, when, where, why question, or how, right? Like, that way they have to give you more than one word at least in that scenario. But Kawhi, I feel like I've done my best with him, but I just think that's who he is. Like, he likes to be reserved, and it is what it is. With Pop, it's not a personal thing with Pop, with the reporters. It's more that he's just annoyed that the league makes him do those interviews in game while he's trying to coach a game. Right. So unfortunately, me and those reporters take the brunt of that. But so I had 2 Pop games in my career. And the first one was it was the Craig Sager night a couple of years ago, and we all dressed up like Craig would have dressed up. May he rest in peace. We miss Craig, and it was a game in San Antonio. So they were playing the Rockets, and the way this works. Okay, let me just give you a little background on how these interviews work. So the road coach always goes at the end of the first quarter, and then the home coach always goes at the end of the third quarter. However, there is a rule that if the game is 20 points or more, right? The disparity is 20 points or more, there's no interview. They don't have to be subjected to do the interview. So with that rule in place, you always kind of keep that in mind. It's really rare in the first quarter that happens. Like, at least it's never happened to me in the first. It's come close a few times, but never happened in the first. It's happened a couple of times in the third quarter. So I'm doing the game, and we're in the third quarter, and this is, again, my first Pop interview on camera. And by the way, behind the scenes, Pop, we have like a coach's interview every single game behind the scenes, off camera, just like, hey, let's talk about the players and the team and how the team's going. And he does that with the broadcast team to just kind of help us with the broadcast and provide context, right? So we're at least as intimately familiar with the ins and outs and the nuances and stuff of all of the different teams. So we meet with both coaches for like 15 or 20 minutes before the game, no cameras. And some stuff they'll tell us, hey, this is off the record, keep it, to yourself, and here's some other stuff that you can use, and yada, yada. So he's always unbelievably kind in those settings, right? So we get to the third quarter. Rockets are up big. They start blowing them out of the water. It's like a 15-point game at halftime. And all of a sudden, boom, they're up 30 points. I'm like, back. I'm on easy street, right? I'm like, all right, I don't have to worry about Pop. I'm good. And then all of a sudden, the Spurs are making a run. And all of a sudden, it's down to like 21 or 22. And I'm going like, oh, crap. Because the worst case scenario is it's a 19-point game. He's going to be unbelievably upset. Yeah. He's going to be really mad at his team. And all of a sudden, I got to go out there and ask him questions, right? So I get a text from Izzy Gutierrez who says to me, oh, no, good luck with Pop if he gets down under 20. And I'm like, oh, no. So there's like 2 minutes left, and it's there, like 22, 21, 23, 20, 23 again. And I'm going, oh, no. And then in the last 2 minutes, the Rockets surge again, and they got it up like 26 or whatever it was. And I was like, all right, I don't have to talk to Pop this time. The next time I had Pop was DeMar DeRozan's return game last year. Yeah. Yeah, because it was when he was traded for Kawhi, right? So we have Pop before the game, and it's me, Mark Jones, and Doris Burke on the game. DB and Mark, who's from Miami, is doing the game, and I'm on sidelines. And during the pre-meeting with Pop, Doris asks a really good question about Toronto and says, hey, Pop, they get out real quick on most teams. What do you do in that scenario if in those first 3 or 4 minutes they're up double digits on you? And he's like, I'll just call timeout and, yell at him. You know what I'm saying? And then she laughs and says, and then poor George is going to have to interview you shortly thereafter. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to look at you and be like, what the hell kind of question is that, right? We're all laughing or whatever. And we walk out of the room, and Doris tells me, don't let that interaction fool you. Which, by the way, Mike Breen said the same thing to me in San Antonio a few months earlier or whatever it was. And I was like, oh, no, I know. Trust me, I know. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna try to get one over on Pop. And I go, the first question clearly is going to be about DeMar, right? So I asked Pop, hey, Pop, DeMar DeRozan's return game. What do you make of the way he's handled some of the emotions? And he looks at me and he goes, I think he's handled them well. I'm like, okay.
Sure.
And then, of course, right. And I go, and I look at him and I say, you know what? I think I'm going to try to come out ahead here. How about we end it on that one? And he looks at me kind of like tilts his head like, look at this dude. You know what I'm saying? And then he looks at me, he looks at the camera, he looks up, and then he looks back at me and he goes, you know, I was really looking forward to a second question. And so I start kind of laughing, right? And he's smiling, and he's kind of chuckling. And I'm like, all right, you know, and I said, well, we can do that, certainly. And I asked him, I think Derek White had been out and he had just come back into the lineup. So I said, you know, Derek White's return into the lineup. How do you think he's fared early on? He's like, I think he's fared well. And then I said, thanks, Pop, appreciate it. He goes, that was fun. And I was like, yeah, we should do it again sometime. And he just looks at me, he laughs, he slaps me on the ass and walks away. And it was as funny an interaction as I've ever had. And it was like a super viral moment on the internet. It was hilarious. My bosses from all over the country are texting me. My colleagues, people are sending me screenshots of it. It is the avatar on my Twitter. Him kind of like being face to face and kind of smirking at each other. But yeah, I have a soft spot in my heart for Pop because he was willing to play along with me there.
Yeah, I met him when the finals were here in Miami. He was at the Epic Hotel. And I just wanted to introduce myself, but he was extremely kind and he was willing to take a picture, but like overly kind. So he's not the monster that people make him out to be. He's actually been really great with the public and, you know, standing up for, you know, for his players and extra. He
is an unbelievable example for what the NBA embodies. There is no question about that. And by the way, a great wine enthusiast as well. Like there are a few guys in the league that know their wine game, like Gregg Popovich.
Oh, yeah? How about Dwayne Wade? Does he know his wine game as good as Gregg Popovich?
I mean, Dwayne's getting there. You know, he's got his own wine, right? So he's getting there. There's no doubt. But Pop is like the godfather of wine. You know what I'm saying? Like Riles may be the godfather in general, right? But Pop is the, you know, he's close. Him and Riles are neck and neck in a lot of things. But I think even Pop may have Riles in the wine game.
Oh, wow. Let me ask you, because out of nowhere this year, Kendrick Perkins is like one of the biggest fans of Miami Heat, right? Like, where did this come from? Have you guys talked about this? Like, yo, what's up? Like, did they pay you to say? Like, what's happening?
Have. Well, no, I mean, they're paying him to be an analyst, but he does believe in them. Like, he does. The jump came to Miami, and Rachel was kind enough to invite me on the show that day with Perk and Amin Al-Hassan. And the four of us did the show from the arena before the Laker game in Miami. And that's when Perk was saying that Giannis should come to the Heat and all that stuff. He just, he loves what they do. Like, you remember Perk, you know, he played for the Celtics. I understand that. But Doc Rivers runs a tight ship, man. You know, Doc Rivers is, you know, I don't call him a Riley disciple, you know, not like the Van Gundy brothers or someone like that. But, you know, Doc learned a lot from Pat, too. And he'd been around Pat enough where I feel like he understands what an organization should run like. And I think Perk appreciates that. He appreciates what Miami brings to the table and understanding all the years of competing against them, that he knows what it's all about. And look, people can say whatever they want about Perk, okay? But there's a lot of guys that I work with that are just tremendous, right? But there are no more real dudes. Like, when I mean real, like just raw and real, and you're getting straight up exactly how they feel. They're not massaging it in any way, shape, or form. Perk is one of them. Matt Barnes is the other one, and Steven Jackson, for sure, is one of those guys too. And that's not a shot at anyone else. I'm just saying is that these guys, those three, are a different level of just raw and real.
That's cool to know. I asked in the past, and you actually replied, but is Steph Curry still your favorite player?
Is Steph Curry still currently you're saying in the league?
Yeah.
Well, he said he enjoys watching him the most.
Yeah, that's what you said when I asked.
Yeah, I do, man. You know what it is? Like, I just think that he brings like this joy to the game, right? And look, that's not a knock on LeBron, who clearly enjoys playing the game too, right? Like, we're splitting hairs on a lot of this stuff. I just think that what Steph did for the game, right? The way he changed the game. And I know some people don't like it. And I know even there are possibly guys within the league that don't love him and feel like the media gives him too much love. But he revolutionized the game in a way that very few have, right? Wilt Chamberlain, Michael Jordan, Shaq, right? Even LeBron, as much as he's revolutionized the game in certain ways, maybe not as much as Steph did on the actual floor of play and the way that stylistically things were played, right? LeBron deserves a million, amounts of credit for player empowerment, all the social stuff he does. There's not an athlete in my lifetime that I've covered that has just kind of dove headfirst into that stuff like LeBron has. And it really began in Miami with Trayvon Martin. Let's not forget that, right? Like that moment was kind of a seminal moment in LeBron's career. And so I'm not trying to take away from watching LeBron because LeBron's a cyborg, man, and you watch him. But I also think what happens with Steph, because he's like 6'3" or 6'4", and I think that he's not like unbelievably athletic like Dwayne Wade was at that height, you know what I'm saying, basically? Yeah. I think that most of us look at him and be like, yeah, that guy's just more relatable. And I think because you literally have to guard him from half court, I think he's one of those guys. Another guy who's climbed up those charts for me is Damian Lillard. And, Damian Lillard is kind of like Steph in that way from a player's perspective and his game. But he's kind of reminds me of like Perk and Matt Barnes and Steven Jackson from like a raw standpoint, where Steph, it's not to say that Steph is not genuine. He's unbelievably genuine. But just Dame's got that chip on his shoulder, right? Yeah. Weber State, 4-year college player. He was supposed to be like a good player, but not a super duper star. And he's a top 10 player in this league. And I just love the chip on the shoulder that he plays with. So, and also a guy who's not like super tall, right? So I think that, we can kind of relate to him as people who are, very average or maybe even below average height in some cases. So yeah, Steph is still in that category. And Damian Lillard is in that category now too, for sure.
You revolutionizing the game, right? Is Zion Williamson going to revolutionize the game? Because what he's doing for his body type is completely different, right? Will he revolutionize the game? And how do you feel about the NBA making sure they got him specifically into Orlando?
I don't know if he's going to revolutionize the game because I just don't know there's going to be that many guys that have that body type, you know what I'm saying, that can play in the NBA. I think most guys that have that body type are going to play like offensive line, right? Like left tackle or maybe defensive tackle in the NFL, or maybe they'll be boxers or something like that. But I think he's unbelievable. I think he's going to be the next face of the league. I do think he has that kind of ability. I think he's got that kind of demeanor. I think a lot's been put on him very quickly, though I will credit David Griffin for trying to take some of that off him very early. I think David is one of the smartest guys we have running an organization in this league. And I do think that the sky is the limit for him. And, like everyone else, right? If he can stay healthy, which I think I feel confident in the people they have working with him. And I think that when you see him in Orlando, I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised by the way he looks. And what do I think about getting him into the Orlando bubble? I think it's smart business. I think that having him in the campus environment is smart business. And by the way, it wasn't just him, right? Damian Lillard is also someone you would want in that environment. Damian Lillard was also very vocal about wanting to have a chance to truly compete for a playoff spot. And the NBA, knowing that the Blazers and the Pelicans are right there neck and neck with the Grizzlies, who had a really tough schedule down the stretch, the Grizzlies. So it was no shoo-in that they were going to keep that 8th spot. So I think it's kind of the most fair thing to do. So, and by the way, it also happens to be the smart business move too. Both things can be true.
Okay.
And we all saw your reaction video to the Knicks missing out on Zion. That was pretty awesome.
Yeah, listen, I have made a career off of mocking the Knicks.
I'm not a Knicks fan at all.
Yeah. And look, eventually it'll come to an end, right?
No.
Eventually it's going to happen, Jordan.
Eventually, look, a blind squirrel finds a nut eventually, right? And I think that, we'll see how that happens. I do like some of their players. Like, I'm a fan of RJ Barrett. I think Mitchell Robinson's a good player. We'll see who they hire as a coach. It seems like Tibbs may be the guy. I think if Tibbs is the guy, I think that Tibbs, we can argue about the minutes and the way he wears guys down, but there's no arguing he's a good coach, right? And he gets results, particularly with young players. And even that Minnesota team, the way it ended as poorly as it did, I mean, Minnesota made the playoffs for the first time in like 14 years with Tibbs at the helm there, and Jimmy and Carl and Teague and those guys, right? So, if Tibbs is there, I could see them hopefully becoming a playoff team. And look, it's good for business when the Knicks are at least relevant, right? I think the league is just fine without them. Like, I don't think that there's some people that think that the league can't thrive without the Knicks being involved. Clearly that hasn't been the case. But I do think it absolutely helps the league when they're important, or at least in the fold in some way, shape, or form.
Do you think Shane Battier replaces Pat Riley?
No.
Okay.
I think that Shane Battier will continue to have a place in the organization. This is purely speculation, okay? It is Lebitard likes to call it reckless speculation. So that's what this is. This is all nothing but a guess, okay? This is has nothing to do with knowledge. If someone's watching this, do not aggregate me. I am not.
We would not do that to you.
Saying this as a report. I think that if and when Pat decides to take a lesser role, I would not be surprised if Spo becomes kind of the Popovich-like figure. That's what if I were a betting man, I would bet on that. But that also means everyone else kind of moves up the food chain too a little bit.
Fair enough.
All right, man. Well, what about
we don't have to keep you, but you've been awesome, man. You've been really awesome.
I was gonna make a joke. What about Tua? How do you feel about Tua?
I love Tua. I finally feel good about the Dolphins for the first time in 20 years. Now, look, I wouldn't play him this year. I keep him in bubble wrap. Let his body heal. He's not a big guy, so let him heal right and be ready to go the following season.
All right, this is my real last question. All right.
Okay.
All right. So this is what I want to see. How familiar are you with the Opalaka Flea Market song?
Opalaka.
There you go.
Yeah. Opalaka. I don't remember the words, but I remember the chorus.
You got to do me a favor. Get a video of you doing the whole song and just put it up on the internet.
I have to find the words to that. I definitely don't know. I'm telling you, I grew up right down the street from
Trust me, you can find it on YouTube. I listen to the song all the time, man. It's such a good jingle.
It's funny. That's funny. I will. I'll give it a shot. I promise.
Oh, there we go.
I'll give it a shot. I promise. I don't know if I'll actually post it. We'll see how it goes.
All right, man.
We'll retweet it.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. If I get it up, if I put it up on my Twitter, it's yours to have.
Oh, shoot. All right, man. Well, thanks again for having us. Oh, actually, for coming on to the show, man. Yeah. I really appreciate it. You're pushing us up the ladder by being here. So
good. I'm happy to do it. I'm really excited with what you guys are doing. I think this is awesome. I think you guys should be doing more of this stuff, more video, more writing, more stuff. South Florida needs more local entities covering its local sports. As much as I love my friends at the newspaper, in the newspaper business, that business is having its own issues at the moment. And I think it's important to have new, young, passionate, intelligent voices doing this stuff. And I think you guys are doing a hell of a job. So keep it up.
Awesome. All right, thanks, man. We hope to catch you here in Miami. Hopefully, when this whole coronavirus is over, and we can party when Miami Heat wins its next championship.
We'll see. Hopefully, that'll happen fairly soon here. We'll see. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you. I appreciate it.